Good morning, people. Well, good morning in some part of the world because this is an art radio which is going to be across the world. We have one minute. Murad. Next. Hi, Samia. That's really quick. 1 minute. Janet. Right. And Hojat. Invite. Right. We've invited. Hi, Krishkant. How are you doing? Okay, so we've invited Murad, we've invited Janet, and we've invited Hojat, and whoever joins. I can only hope for the best. Yes, internet working well today. Fingers crossed. Uh, so, uh, as I said, for those of you who are joining in for the first time, Art Radio is basically a creative journey. It's stories about art, and art itself is it's a huge thing. I mean, it's an ocean. Murad, if you're and Hojat, whoever, can you just send an invitation to join? Yes. Okay. No, sorry, Samir Mahmood, you're not joining. Samir Mahmood is not going to be in our live video just yet. I need the space for the other folk. Uh, right. Murad. Right. Janet. Invite. Okay. Are you telling me that Hojat finally managed to join? I am so impressed. Okay. Uh, right. As I was saying, art radio, the whole idea of art radio is to talk about art, past, present, and future. And you can only look at the future if you've already looked at the past. And that's where we talk to art historians, we talk to collectors, we talk to authors, we talk to people who know their art. And no, I haven't got an invitation from either of them. Let me try again. Hi, Rupali. Janet. Folks, as you know, those of you who have to join, that's Murad, that's Janet, that's Hojat, just send a request and we'll put you into the video. Otherwise, another person who I haven't actually invited has already said that they want to join, so we'll go ahead with that. Okay, so as I said, while we're waiting for them to join, thank you so much, Samuel. I love the fact that people like you are coming in and joining. That's the amazing part. Uh, and I love the fact that you're going across borders because these topics are South Asian. I can't put them into little things and silos and say, okay, this is only Indian, that is only Iranian, because a topic like Farishte can only be across the whole world, right? I mean, whether it's Christian, yes, Murad joined, excellent, and basically Murad has written the book on angels in Islamic art, so she's the right person to talk about this. Janet, White, and where is Murad in White? And so, as I said, we've been lucky enough on a topic like Mughal history to get people from across the world to speak. It's not just people sitting in India, it's not just people sitting in Pakistan, which, of course, last week we were lucky enough to have Professor Samia talking to us about Lahore frescoes, except. Okay. Sit. Hi, Shishmita. Janet, where are you? Janet. Right. No problem. We will accept again. And Murad. Hello.
Hi. How are you?
I'm very well, and thank you so much for joining in.
Of course.
No,
Bring this up. Or
Smita, sorry, I can't accept you right now either. I've got to keep this open for Janet and Hojat, whoever manages to join us out of the two of them. Let me see who else is here. No. For some reason, my mother's Instagram constantly wants to join the talk. And every time I actually put her on, she gets a little flustered about it, as you can imagine.
yes.
Okay. While we are waiting for them to join in, can I just quickly introduce Murad? Uh, as I said, Murad has actually written the book on angels in Islamic art, and I was reading it today, and just the opening is phenomenal. So he's talked about Akbar and how he's supposed to have. I mean, this is what Abul Fazl says, that Akbar is supposed to have drawn an image very early in life, where he says that Hemu is. Where he says this is Hemu, and this is Hemu which has been broken to pieces. And that's why he doesn't want to kill Hemu on the battlefield. And today, on what we call a wolf moon night, which is supposed to be a holy night, or it's a full moon definitely, and to discuss Farishte on such a night, I thought was it just came together. It just made sense.
Thank you so much for inviting me. The book I mentioned a little bit in that book on the symbolism and the role of angels and the depictions of angels. Specifically, it's focused more on the devotional culture of Islam in South Asia and looking at a lot of Mughal patronage for images of devotion. So one of the particular sort of depictions are, of course, angels. Most of the book focuses on depictions of saints and prophets, and as well as other sort of images of the patrons themselves. But angelic depiction is a part of that, definitely.
So can I just start by asking two questions, and you can take it either way, whichever way you want to. One is, where does this depiction of angels start? Is it Christian versus Christian first and then Islamic, or does it go much further back than either of these two religions? And secondly, what's the difference between a pari and a farishta?
Yeah, those are big questions.
The big questions.
Well, of course, the depictions of people with wings goes way back, into pre-Christian, pre-Islamic times. You see in ancient Iran and the sort of Assyrian uh, reliefs, and like really, it's across traditions in that sense. So it's nothing unique to Christianity or Islam in that sense. You have so many depictions of that. But when we think about the Semitic traditions, it seems like, of course, Christianity comes before, and the idea of the angels and the archangels is already very well established. But the Islamic tradition has its own parallel development, both visually, but it's all based within uh, the theology and the Quran, but also later on in Hadith literature and also some of the early exegesis of the Quran. So the Quran itself doesn't mention the angels by name as such. You have Gabriel, of course, who is the one who brings the message to the Prophet. Uh, but beyond that, you have the mention of angels, the ones who hold the throne of God and those who do his work, but you don't have any names. So names come into the picture through the prophetic tradition and then later traditions who interpret Quran and Hadith. So it very quickly, within the first generation, you have Ibn Abbas, who's one of the first, he's the father of Quranic interpretation. He has a long treatise or long sections within his tafsir, a Quranic commentary on angels. So that's where very quickly, right in the beginning of the first generation, you start getting detailed commentaries on what these angelic presences are. And from there, then I think it spreads. And as the religion spreads and becomes localized in places like Central Asia and Iran, South Asia, the already pre-existing ideas of these liminal presences, these bridges between our world and the heavens, because that exists in every tradition. I mean, that's wherever you have human presence, you have these elements, which we call angels, but beings, spirits that connect us with God. And so as Islam becomes localized in these regions, I think the visual iconography becomes more specific. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say that there's any direct Christian connection as such. You do have the shared idea of the angels, and the names are also similar. So you have that as well. But later on, when we go into the Mughal period, and specifically the 17th century with the Emperor Jahangir influencing a lot of the Mughal art, you do have the cherubs and the putti, the very particular Renaissance angelic depictions coming into Mughal painting. In frescoes also you see that. You had Samia Vine speaking last week a little bit on those beautiful frescoes from Lahore, and you see a lot of those angels. And it's a sort of mixture. You see both of those visually. You see that sort of Persianate tradition, which goes directly within that sort of Islamic ideas of angels, but then you also have in the Mughal tradition the more European type of depiction.
So within one generation, because if I'm looking at the Lahore fort, and I was wondering about this, there is both the Islamic representation of a Farishta right there in the hammam, which your wife posted yesterday or day before yesterday.
Very Islamic, yes.
And in the same fort, there are cherubic versions of angels.
Exactly. And that's something worth thinking about, like and that really happens after the Jahangir period. I don't think you have that as such developed. Those sort of cherubic images come after Jahangir, and then they become, I guess, staple within the Mughal and South Asian region. But before that, you don't have that. I shared an image or two from the Humayun period, Akbar period, and of these angels, and they're very much within the Persianate space. So that's a question to think of, like, does their meaning change when you have cherub, very clearly a Renaissance-inspired angel, versus a more Islamic-looking angel? That's a good question. In the particular early texts, like the commentary I was mentioning of Ibn Abbas, there's also one or two other ones from early on. You have very specific depictions of the four archangels. For example, you have Mikael and Israel and Israfil and Jibrail. Those are the four main ones, and they have these beautiful depictions textually described. And in one of the ones for Mikael, for example, I can read it to you if you want. It's a beautiful description.
Please.
Because Mikael specifically is you can think of him as the angel who brings down rain and keeps care of the crops. So he's like the subsister or the sustainer in our world. And this early comment.
So Indra.
Yeah, I was sorry?
Indra?
Maybe, if you want to compare it, maybe, yeah. So a good question to see if you can compare it with the Hindu tradition or not. But so the commentary, this early commentary says that as for Mikael, Allah created him 5,000 years after Israfil. He has hairs of saffron from his head to his feet, and his wings are of green topaz. And on each hair he has 1,000,000 faces, and in each face he has 1,000,000 eyes, and he weeps from each eye out of pity for the sinners among the believers. And in each face he has 1,000,000 mouths, and in each mouth he has 1,000,000 tongues. Each tongue speaks of 1,000,000 languages, and each tongue asks pardon from Allah for believers and sinners. And if from each eye fall 70,000 tears, and Allah creates from each tear a single angel in the image of Mikael, and these angels glorify God until the day of resurrection, and their name is, in the Arabic, it's karubiyun, and that's the same word as the Latin cherub, cherubim. So that's interesting, where this idea of the cherub is coming from in these two distinct traditions. So that sort of cherubic figure could be thought of as maybe a lesser angelic being compared to the archangels, who have more potency and more power, and they seem to represent God's immediate. It's basically God doing all his sort of major work through these angels.
So you had also sent me a picture of when the Prophet goes on the I've gotten the word for the exactly.
Yeah.
And there is Gabriel again, I think, who is, or are there more than one angels included in that picture as well?
There's several, as you can see there, it is in the background. There's a whole troop of angels, but the one who's leading the Prophet and his steed is Gabriel, and he's holding light. And it's important because whenever you see within the Persianate tradition, like this painting from Safavid period, when you see those angels, they're usually always carrying light, like they're carrying trays of light. In this case, Gabriel is carrying light itself. They have halos of light, and those are all shown through beautifully gilded gold paint or gold leaf. And the reason behind this is because God says in the Quran also that he has created the angels out of his own light, Nur. And that is something different compared to humans, who he's created out of clay. And then you have the other great creation, which is the jinn, which he creates out of fire. So these are different elements, but the angels themselves are created out of his own nur or light. And you can see it's coming up again in the background. They all are just full of light. So it's not supposed to be fire, but it's supposed to be nur, light, which is stable. It's not volatile. So that's the difference between nur and nar. Nar being fire, nur being light. And so that's why they are close to God. And in the hierarchy of creation, they are the closest.
So I, I've just thinking, I mean, we've got Good Omens, which is coming on television even now, and people like me are hooked onto it. And the names of the angels haven't changed in all this time. The same name that you have in the 7th century is coming down across all religions, I mean, how is that even possible? When everything
But they are
has changed.
realities. If one is of faith, whether that's a Christian faith or Muslim faith, you acknowledge their realities. So once they exist, it's like saying that, why doesn't the name of the sun change? I mean, it's a reality. You can't change it. It's there. So it's the same with the angelic presences. They are real with a capital R, more real than our physical corporeal world, because in the cosmic hierarchy of creation, according to Islam, and someone like Avicenna Ibn has really beautifully articulated these cosmic hierarchies. Ibn Arabi has done that. A lot of these famous, well-known philosophers and thinkers have outlined the creational hierarchy, and within that, if you really break it down into the most basic hierarchy, the highest level is, of course, of God's own quiddity, his essence, his zat or zat, which is beyond being or beyond description. But right below that, you have the realm of the angelic presences, the Alame Malakut. And
What is
that, sorry?
Almi? Those are the archangels, or there are more
Yes.
versions?
There's, I mean, thousands of other angels, but essentially it is that realm which contains the angelic presence, which means that it's right closest to God's own realm of power. So he, in a way, according to this tradition, enacts his power and his creativity through those precisely those angels, and they all have distinct roles. And in this particular text that I was reading before, that is a commentary explicating the role of the angels. Each and every raindrop is assigned to these angels, so that not even a single drop of rain falls without an intentionality behind it. So it's very specific. This idea of God working in this world through the angels is a very important aspect of Muslim faith. So there are realities, and their reality is far more real than our world, because as the hierarchy goes, it's God's realm, then it's the angelic realm. Then as we come down, you come to the imaginal realm, and the imaginal realm, or the alam khayal, is sometimes also thought of as the world of symbolic form. That's where it almost comes close to the idea of the Platonic ideal form. That's the place where everything has its ideal, from every individual to every tree to horse to every being. And that's where usually this imaginal sphere is where more of the liminal beings can exist, like jinns and fairies, like Parees and other beings. So the what you were asking about, the Pari embodies a lower realm. It's still higher than our corporeal, physical dunya, this world, which is the lowest of the low, compared to this hierarchy. Our world, which is material world, and the psychic world, is the lowest in this rung of creation. Above it is that imaginal space, not the imaginary space, not something that we just cook out of our imagination. It is thought of as the world of khayal, with a capital K, you can say, because it's almost like God's imagination, not our imagination. So that's where these fairy tales or fables, which we think of as stories, actually exist in a real space.
So behind you is the reason, not behind you,
Yeah,
behind me, sorry.
I guess.
Behind me is the reason why I wanted to hold this talk, which is Hojat's description, and Hojat Amani being a Iranian artist who has these amazing description, these paintings. They're both collages and paintings, both of bringing things together, and they are of mostly modern women in the form of angels.
Mm-hmm.
So there were three questions which I wanted to ask him, but I'll ask you because I haven't been able to get him to join, and I don't know if he's in the audience as well. One is, why do we consider the angels as the leaders of kind of rebellion when we want to depict a certain kind of resistance? Whether it's the angels leading the prophet, whether it's now, as Hojat is saying, the women as angels, whether it's, as I keep coming back, Neil Gaiman, who is my favorite, most angry author, writing good omens about angels actually leading a war against God even. Why do angels then become a symbol of resistance and uh, how else do I put it? Yeah, I can ask that only. That's one question.
It's a good question. That would be for Hojat to really answer where he's taking that from. In my mind, it comes more from a sort of biblical Christic world, not an Islamic idea at all. The idea of angels, because they're completely aligned with God's will. So there's no concept of the angel rebelling or leading any of that. So they're completely aligned with God's will. Whereas in the Christian idea, you do have the fact that the devil, Satan himself, is a fallen angel. So that's where you can have the idea of rebelling, going against, or even sort of questioning a little bit. I might be wrong. I'm going out of my not area of knowledge and expertise completely. I'm just sort of winging it right now.
When I
But I'm
bring,
just sort of thinking about it.
the moment I bring pop culture in, we're all winging it, right? And
Yes.
people get really
Yes.
shocked that art historians seem to know anything about pop culture.
Yeah, I know very little of pop culture, but in this case, I think it seems to be aligned more with the sort of Western idea of the angel. It also maybe, yeah, because in the Quran or in Islam, the Satan is made out of fire, so he's more of the jinn, not of the angelic. Whereas in the Christian world, it's more he's like a fallen angel. So there's a difference here, if I'm not wrong. I might be wrong. But also thinking about the role of the angels, maybe it also has to do that they sort of tend to transcend binaries in many ways, in the sense that they do transcend sort of bifurcation or scission. So maybe that way it could be a symbol of something higher, a sort of higher, appealing to the higher conscience of humanity, perhaps. That I mean, that's what I would see in Hojat's work. I might be wrong again because I'm not familiar with his work too much.
But angels, they don't have a sex, right? They don't have a gender, sorry.
Yeah, to my knowledge, they do, especially the way they're represented in the paintings again. As I guess, because in the Persian language you don't have pronouns, so it's a very easy escape out of that because you don't need to define a particular pronoun to the peri or to the angel. But in the Arabic, at least, it comes out as a masculine trait, definitely, at least for the main angels. But I think the depictions, it seems like they don't really have a particular gender. Definitely, when you look at those angels, they have sort of effeminate characteristics, but they're definitely not women. You don't have, like the painting that's in the back of you, it could be a young person, boy or a girl. It's very difficult to really identify. So I think they clearly within this world, the Persianate world, they are consciously not identifying a particular gender for these angels. Yes.
And you brought up the pari, so I see more of the pari in the Dakkani influence
Yes.
than the Mughal
You see
influence.
the cosmo, what do you call it? The composite peri coming in the Deccani tradition a lot. And
What is that about?
well, again, I think it's lower than the level of the angel. So the peri then encompasses these multiple realms one could think about. Like the peri is someone who can come and go between our world and that imaginal or ideal realm. And it's coming from a lot of these earlier stories and traditions. The one that comes to mind, of course, is the Hamza Nama, the stories of Hamza, which are very much imaginary in the sense that he's based on a historical figure, the uncle of the Prophet. But the stories that take on their own form, they're coming out of an oral tradition, which then popularized across the Persian-speaking world, and of course, in the Mughal period, the young Akbar really loved them, and he had them illustrated, had them written down, so you have a more concrete idea. And there, the pari and the realm of the fairies features a lot, and it's very clear that that realm is something that exists in that particular alam-e-khayal, that realm of the imaginal, and the peri is the one who can come and go between these two worlds. I mean, Hamza himself, marries the daughter, the queen, the princess of fairies, and it's very much a connection between that higher realm, but not the highest realm. So I think the peri represents that liminality, and that's what comes to my mind. And this idea of the composite also means that there's this sort of dynamism being able to take in these multiple, or at least these two worlds. There are other meanings, of course, I'm sure. That
Yeah, because you mentioned this marrying the daughter off, and that in the Hindu epics, you very often have nymphs who the kings marry the daughters off.
I think
And
you said it exactly right. That's the word. It is that nymph figure. Uh, Rather than the angelic figure, angel almost is like a pure being. It's pure light, God's light, doing the works of almost like what you would think of. And that's just my opinion. I'm not saying quoting anyone, but like thinking about the greater deities in the Hindu world, almost performing the role of Brahma or a Shiva or a Vishnu, because beyond that lies the sort of beyond being. But those sort of greater beings that are acting within this world, the archangels would be more like that, if you really want to sort of stretch it and make that comparison. Whereas the Peris would be more like nymph figures, these sort of volatile, dynamic beings, these sort of demigods. One could think about it as demigods, because there can be mischievous, like the one that I put in the background, I think was coming in, is shows from the Tutiname from the Akbar period, in which it's a mischievous Peri who has kidnapped someone and is now being fought by one of the protagonists. So they're clearly meddling in our affairs, and they're part of our world. They're not of our world, but they can become part of our world. These are the presences that people can also conjure through magic, for example, white magic, black magic, and almost like these higher yogini type figures uh, that can tinker with the physical realm for the benefit or or a sort of lack of benefit, but they can tinker with our world. So it seems like the Peri resides within that realm, whereas the angel is far above and superior. The angels are doing the direct command of God. So that has nothing to
so
do with us in that sense.
then the composite animal, either as the pari herself as a composite animal, or the her steed, her
Usually,
familiar as a composite animal,
usually
then becomes uh,
control, power.
about this.
Usually, it's not the peri herself, but the animal that the peri is riding, which is the composite animal. So it's almost showing the sort of dynamic, perhaps power or the ability to control these elements of nature within that being. Perhaps it seems like, but it's also I've read other sources like Sheila Canby, quoting that these composite animals are in fact also symbols of the perfected soul, the Insan al Kamil, or the sanctified soul, which has basically become a mirror of the world and the cosmos, so that he or she then contains all these possibilities within that one being within themselves. So maybe then, in that sense, the Peri represents a higher possibility within that person, the realized individual. That's one interpretation that I read from Sheila Canby. So maybe.
And, okay, so there are questions which have been coming in which are really interesting. So I want to just quickly ask you. One asked, how legitimate is using modern characters in reimagining traditional miniatures?
Mm-hmm.
And one more was, the Pari seem to be very much visual representation of Mesopotamian uh, creatures. So
Yeah, it's true. You have it's a well, what I would, and that Mesopotamian idea is 100% right, because you have this seamless. If you look at it through the art historical lens, it's seamless. It goes way back into that period. But my own personal interpretation would be that uh, realities are realities, just like the sun and the moon is real. So every tradition depicts the sun and the moon. So it doesn't mean that the sun and the moon are being created by that tradition. It means that these realities pre-exist our religions, cultures, traditions. And when you have a creative cultural expression, it obviously taps into these realities, just like we tap into the air we breathe or the trees that we see. It's like every tradition depicts trees and mountains And in the same way, every tradition depicts these higher realities, which we can't see with our five senses, but we have good evidence through so many accounts of saints and prophets and sacred books and personal accounts of people who have come into contact with these beings. So as a person of faith, one has to acknowledge the existence of these realities, which is why you see it in every tradition on earth. So that's why the Mesopotamian presence also. That's what my answer would be to that.
So if you're saying it's real, have you ever, I know I have, I mean, in human form, I've met people who've come completely done something so amazing and unusual and vanished, and I have to consider them angels. Have you ever seen
Myself,
them
no,
angels?
not to my knowledge. Not personally. Maybe I have, but not to my knowledge. But just going by other accounts from so many traditions, from the Hindu tradition, from the Muslim tradition. I mean, just reading more deeply these different. I'm just reading the questions.
Yeah, sorry,
These different.
I'll just put it on them.
Yeah.
There are two very nice questions, actually.
There was another
One
question
is,
that
any
you asked.
paintings you know showing different realms?
Yes, the one in the back that is rolling of this angel or holding the entire cosmos. It'll come up in a second, Rafe. It comes up with these circular worlds. Oh, hi.
Hello,
Hi.
finally, and just on time. Did you
Thank
prepare
you.
to be just on time?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, lovely to see you, and thanks for inviting me to join in. Yeah, oh, great. Thanks.
Because I just asked Murad the last question I planned for him, so this is just perfect timing.
Okay,
So
good,
just
good,
looking
good.
up, I was just answering one question about if there's depictions of these worlds. So yeah, you do see it. So in the Alame, in the Ajaib al-Makhluqat manuscript, there it is, right behind you right now. You have that angel, and that's the one of the opening pages, because that's the start of the depiction of creation, because that manuscript, that medieval manuscript, is about the wonders of creation, and it starts with the highest creation, and then it comes down following that Islamic cosmological hierarchy. So it shows that, and that's another belief within the Islamic angelology, is that there are in fact five major angels. You have the four archangels, but in the center of those archangels is the central angel, which is known as Ar-Ruh, the spirit, because God mentions the spirit of God alongside the angels. So God sent down his angels and his spirit. So some commentators of the Quran take that idea of the spirit, Ruh, to be the fifth or the central angel, and that is precisely what's depicted right behind you right now. The angel Ruh holding all of God's creation and bringing it down. So you do have the depictions of exactly what we're discussing in this greater Islamicate and Persianate painting tradition.
So I didn't know that about Ruh. So when you sent me that picture, I did not know the significance of that. So thank you so much for that.
Almost like you have the four stable elements, earth, water, fire, clay, and then you have the fifth element, right? Ether. So it's almost that sort of intangible fifth element, but in this case, it's at the angelic level. So you have the four archangels who have all their assigned duties, and then you have the central angel out of which comes all of this creation. It's almost like this creative intellect of God that generates all of creation, and then you have those four archangels who are sort of holding all the world together.
So I'm just going to welcome Janet. Janet Rady is, she also is a galleryist who owns Janet Rady Fine Arts in London. For Hojat was kind enough to get us together, but Janet also did her degree in Islamic art history from SOAS, and hers is a completely different area from what Murad and I have been discussing. So the timing was just perfect. So, Janet, you're going to take us a little further back, right? from?
Yes, I mean, my master's, I studied 13th century Islamic metalwork, which was found in the Hijaz. So that's sort of the areas of mostly Syria and Iraq and possibly in Egypt. And what was so interesting about what I was studying was there's a very specific group of metalware objects which have Christian scenes on them. So we're talking about 13th century Christian scenes, including angels. So that's where my interest in angels in the Islamic world came about from. So I was looking at who was it who was making these works? Were they Christian workmen or were they Muslim workmen making them for a Christian audience? Because obviously at that time you remember that the Crusades were taking place. So I was looking at all sorts of precedents. So I was looking at Eastern Armenian art, Byzantine art, the Syrian churches, the monasteries in the Western Desert in Egypt, and there are quite a few examples of really very early depictions of angels on these monuments, and then including obviously it gets transported or transposed into the metalwork of the era. And to cut a long story short, I determined that actually these pieces were being made by the Muslim craftsmen, but they were actually perhaps inspired by the Christian iconography. So that was my interest in it, but it's fascinating. I suppose, again, it travels all the way through, as Murad was saying, into then the Persianate world. We have Takibustan, which in fact is pre-Islamic, which is a Sasanian rock relief with angels on that. So the iconography of angels was very familiar to the Iranians, and then was included in the manuscripts and the miniatures. And obviously, Hojat will be aware of this and was using some of this the same symbolism in his work. You can see it behind you now. And again, that's a combination of Qajar imagery and his own angel wings, which he fabricated himself. So those angel wings actually exist. And then he was asking mostly women to have their pictures taken with the angels, the angel wings. And for the Iranians, they understand the symbolism of the angels, and they were very happy to have their photographs taken. And then he produced the photographic series, which I've then been selling to my clients. So it's a very nice story that brings sort of the pre-Islamic period right up to the modern day, the contemporary world of art in Iran.
So when you say pre-Islamic, could I just ask what you mean by pre-Islamic? Is there a certain centuries?
Yeah, the Sasanian world. So we're talking about pre 7th century in Iran, and also the Byzantine world, but specifically Takibustan was Sasanian. So and it was the Muslims who conquered the Sasanian dynasty in Iran, and then the country became Islamic. So, but yeah, it was a real melting pot of different cultures at that point, and that's why it's so fascinating to study it. Iran always has been. You can't point a finger and say yes, that was a specifically Iranian tradition. They've been influenced by a lot of other cultures, and similarly have gone on to influence cultures around them from then onwards. And you have the Greek influence, and obviously it's a topic for a PhD thesis. So
this is fascinating.
Yeah.
I was looking at Inanna, who was one of the earliest goddesses, and again a Mesopotamian goddess, and her depiction normally has wings on it. So is there a connection between goddesses coming down to angels that we have any idea about?
I would say very probably there would be, yes, because you've got the spiritual element in it, which crosses over. So, as Mara was saying, the roof, and I think that definitely has come all the way down from Mesopotamian earlier. I haven't followed it right back. I don't know what the very first depiction of wings would be, but it's a very common symbol within the Middle East. Later on, obviously, it became more a symbol of power. But yeah, it's got a fascinating history.
How did wings become a symbol of power?
Well, that was when they were transformed into birds. And if you think of the eagle,
Right.
even in Roman times, the eagle is a symbol of the Roman Empire, for instance, with the wings spread out. And then, if you think much later on into the Nazi era, that symbology was again using birds, wings, power.
And the Mughal tradition, the Persian tradition, the Huma bird, the wings of the Huma bird are symbolic of kingship.
Yeah. So.
Do you both have questions for each other? After that fascinating, I mean,
yeah. Not specifically, but maybe, yeah, I think if Murad could, well, I don't know, could you say anything about how angels in South Asia are considered today, whether they still hold the same symbolism as they would have done in the Mughal era? Are people still using angels in artwork? I know it's slightly outside of your remit, but is there an equivalent of Hojat, perhaps?
Good question. It doesn't come to my mind as much. I think it seems like today in the Persians, like Iran, the idea of the angel is much more
Stronger.
It's more potent, more alive compared to South Asia. But that's what my feeling is. I might be completely wrong because I can't think of within the art world or even culturally, it doesn't seem to be as apparent.
No, interesting. Yeah, I'm just thinking now. I've got friends who are called Farishte, Iranian friends. So even in the name, that still continues.
Much more
whereas,
common.
Yeah. Whereas I think. I mean,
Pakistan has had a sort of strange history in any case. It's like neither India nor Iran. Like historically, it's been that region has been both at the same time. It's been Persianate culturally. It has been Indic culturally, so it's been completely both. But now it's neither. So I think it shows in the arts of the region as well that it's always grappling for, searching for its identity, and it keeps on including it.
No, interesting.
Samia points out lots of depictions of the winged horse. And yes, Buraq has, because I was just thinking about the Buraq, and across Africa, wherever there's an Islamic concept, there's the Buraq. Although in India we go more towards the cow, which we have now given wings to. I've forgotten the name for her. So the Buraq has now become a symbol.
Across in Southeast Asia, Indonesia as well, and in Pakistan, you see Buraq and behind trucks, painted on trucks, and generally in the idea of contemporary artists as well. I know Hamra Abbas has done a lot of work on using the image of the Buraq as this vehicle of transport. But it's specifically, it's not a Buraq is in the early sort of commentaries you hear. It's not an angel. It's almost like this sort of lower, lesser being, but it has a lot of power, almost like a mule-like being. Like it has, it's supposed to be a half mule, half in the early traditions, but then it evolves, it changes, and becomes more refined. But definitely not an angelic presence. It's a different being.
Somebody saying all those wings around Shahjahan Sikandar's now atop the courthouse.
Oh, really? Wait, we should see that. I don't know about that.
No, I know Shahjahan Sikandar, but not. Yeah,
that's particular.
That works.
Okay.
So.
Folks, does anyone have any more questions? Even if you have questions, can you just put them into the question box? Because I think the folks who are following today's discussion are fairly well read from what I can see. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy for that. Otherwise, we shall come back to you with more questions.
Yeah.
This is utterly fascinating. Can we talk about why Buraq has a woman's head? That's absolutely new.
That's a new thing.
Yeah.
That's not you don't see that in the earlier depictions. It's not a woman's head. That's something that's come out more recently. I don't know why or how, but in the traditional depiction of an angel versus that a traditional depiction of an angel is aesthetical representation. What do you mean aesthetical representation? I'm looking at the question.
I can see if I can add Samir to this conversation if you want to hear the question. But we might just get hung, so don't. No, he hasn't asked. Okay, can't do that. But aesthetical representation, I'm not sure what. But we'll need
that means
more.
Yeah, artistic rather than purely graphic. I don't know. I mean, obviously, the symbolism of angels has been interpreted differently in different traditions throughout the Christian world, the Muslim world. It's interesting to note that even though some people say that representation in Islamic art is forbidden, you will see angels persistently appearing in Persian miniatures and in manuscripts, carpets, etc., etc. So that is it's a very strong tradition in Christianity. Clearly, angels have been depicted probably most, I say, even from medieval periods onwards, but they're most commonly found in Renaissance art, Baroque art, and even today. I'm trying to think of contemporary Western artists who are using angels in their work. I can't think of any, but you just think about the whole scenography around Christmas, for instance. That's the symbol of the angel is incredibly powerful still. You find angels on Christmas cards, you find angels in pantomimes, you find angels on, I don't know, boxes of chocolates. It's still very, very strong as a tradition with religious symbolism in the Western world. So it's cross-cultural. You know, the fact that Muslims and Christians and other cultures still recognise and appreciate the symbology of the angels, I think, is fascinating. So
It is. It really is. To answer Sonika, for example, Sonika, we have discussed apsaras. So when I put this out, please go through the entire conversation. The angels have genders. Do we know that through Persian? But through Arabic, we know the angels are male. Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
Which Mughal miniatures are famous for angels paintings?
Which Mughal painters?
Which Mughal miniatures are famous for angels paintings?
Many, like hundreds and hundreds of Mughal paintings with angels, especially
yesterday I was looking at somebody in my class was looking at Jahangir shoots Malik Ambar's head, and you realize there are two angels even in that, and we're having a whole discussion about how, why, and who, and why, but that's a topic for another time. It won't be here, but
they're everywhere in Mughal painting. You could almost think about them that they are an extension of God's will. And so when you see them in a Mughal painting, you see them a lot in these royal imperial depictions. It just shows through the very presence of the angel that God is present through them, and is sort of celebrating and sort of justifying their right to kingship through those actions, and also empowering the emperors through the angelic presences, because sometimes in Jahangir, it's them who are bringing the swords and bow and arrows to the emperor, or doing some sort of work, or just showering blessings through flowers. And so you really see that. And then you see that through the apsaras and other beings, even as early as like depictions, Buddhist relief depictions in Sanchi or Amaravati, if you go back into, I'm like going into the sort of first, second century BCE, for example, you go back to that period and you see the exact same thing being depicted. You have these angelic presences which are representing the pleasure of the divine realm or of the divine beings, of these individuals coming in to pray and do puja in front of the stupa, and then you have these heavenly beings showering garlands onto them. And you see that through that right into the 17th, 18th century Mughal period, a similar sort of thing happening, which is fascinating for me, that those sort of connections. Whether that was consciously done or not, again, I would think that this is just part of the cultural imagination. So these ideas or these realities get depicted again and again. And so you see that being used by the Mughal imperial atelier to show the presence of heaven, of God, through the intermediary beings of angels, which is why I think, as I think Moin Faruqi asked about using imagery of angels, it's almost as Jared was also saying, that it's almost like it's always been there because it's all right to depict angels, right? It might be problematic to depict a realm that is higher than that, the sort of godly realm, but you always have had depictions of angels. They can sort of do the work of God, even when it might be contentious to depict God, of course. But angels have always been fine, and they've been used within a modern contemporary context as well, without any problem or controversy.
Okay. I'm not sure who Emma wants out of us to call her, but somebody please call Emma. She's asked 2-3 times for somebody to call her. Okay, I'm going to stop now because now we're getting into the Hindu miniatures, and that's a different class
That's a whole
altogether.
other world.
Thank you so much, guys. This was really
Thank
good
you.
fun. And Murad, you're giving a lecture at the Met, the Anna Marie Schimmel lecture on the 29th, which I think is Monday, and I can't wait to hear that one as
Thank you
well.
so
So,
yes, that's
thank you so much.
Interesting.
Good night.
Oh, thank you. It was fun. So good. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.